Iniquity was found in thee. Angels inhabited earth before Adam, Part 3. Today's video is sponsored by Voices in the Wilderness YouTube channel. Mr. Brown from Voices in the Wilderness blessed my production center with a brand new microphone today. Thanks to Mr. Brown for today's improved audio clarity. Mr. Brown is a real man who has real questions about the scriptures, and that's why he gets real answers. Shout out to him and his channel. Check him out. Link in the description. Now, first before we get to what is sin, where did sin originate? And again, as we've proven in the last few parts, it didn't originate in heaven because Lucifer wasn't in heaven when sin entered his heart. We're going first to Ezekiel chapter 28, verse 15, where it reads, "Thou was perfect in thy ways from the day that thou was created till iniquity, or lawlessness, as the New King James reads, was found in thee." In Lucifer, iniquity or sin was found in Satan. That was the origin of sin, but here's the follow-up question that must be answered. Where was Satan physically located when this sin began and entered into his heart? Well, let's look at Isaiah 14 and show you where he was. Isaiah 14 and the specific verse, well, let's just start in verse 12. "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground that didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God." So he's under heaven, going to ascend into heaven, and then his throne is below heaven, so it's on the earth. And it was on the earth sin entered Satan's heart. That's where he was. What is sin? 1 John 3:4. Sin is the transgression of God's law. And follow it up with verse 8. "He who transgresses God's law is of the devil, for the devil has been sinning from the beginning." So before we get more into pounding the devil's head into the ground, caving his skull in, let's go back to this term we covered in part 2, the term sons of God. As the term sons of God can refer to humans as well as angels. Again, the context must decide whether it refers to men or to angels or to both. So where we're going now is to Genesis 6:2. This is supposedly when fallen angels had intercourse with women, who then gave birth to giants. And so let's prove it. The scripture says to prove all things. And that's the theme of this channel, is to prove all things. Show me in the scripture. Don't tell me. Show me. So notice I will read Genesis 6:2 in its full entirety. Verse 2 says that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all they chose. So again, it's not a one verse doctrine, because they'll quote verse 2 and 4. So you got a table that's built on two legs, not too steady. So let's dissect this verse 2 again. First off, notice the verse before and the verse after mentions nothing about angels, only mentions men. In fact, the chapter before and the chapter after don't even mention angels. But all of a sudden, in Genesis 6 verse 2, all of a sudden now angels are mentioned. See how that ain't really letting the context decide now, is it? Another thing to notice is, why did the angels wait so long until they began having children, when they could have began building up their numbers immediately? That don't make much sense either. And one more thing before moving on to the next point is, if fallen angels were able to have demon babies, the demons would outnumber God's righteous angelic force by now if they continually making offspring. Yet Scripture clearly states that only 1/3 of angels serve Satan, and only 1/3 of unclean evil spirits serve Satan. Well, let me be more specific. Of all the angels, 1/3 of them became unclean, and all them 1/3 who are unclean serve Satan, no less, no more. So, we descend. Let's go here. The term sons of God in Genesis 6:2 speaks of men, not angels. When we go back to Genesis chapter 4, verse 19, prior to the flood, when a man who descended from the line of Cain, named Lamech, was the first to commit the sin of having more than one wife. Now, after the flood, men continue Lamech's sin of more than one wife. Furthermore, the giants and men of renown are in separate groups. Let's prove that. Let's read verse 4 now. Because again, I told you they use 2 verses for this doctrine, not just one. Verse 4 says, there were giants in the earth in those days. And also after that, after what? After the giants, then when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, that they bare children unto them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So notice this, that the giants and men of renown are in separate groups. Let me reread that for you, because you might not have caught it the first time. Verse 4. There were giants in the earth in those days. And also, after that, after what? After the giants in those days, then, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, that they bare unto them the same, became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. Again, notice how the men of renown came after the days of the giants. They don't ever point that out to you, because again, it's wrong doctrine. Again, now check this out. We'll close this section of the video by reading chapter 6, verses 1 through 5. And again, remember, they use verse 2 and 4 for their doctrine, yet literally verse 1, verse 3, and 5 mention men. This will completely destroy that doctrine. If you still believe it, I still got more for you after that. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. Who? Men. And daughters were born unto them. It isn't just the daughters who multiplied, the men too. See, it was the men who took the daughters. Verse 2. That the sons of God, see, talking about the men in verse 1, saw the daughters of men, that were called daughters in verse 1, that they were fair. And they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, my spirit shall not always strive with who? It says with man. It doesn't say with fallen angels. For that he man is also his flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. So man's mentioned in verse 3. Verse 4, and there were giants in the earth in those days. And also after that, again, after what? After the days of the giants, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare them children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. See, the Bible calls these offspring men, but if angels literally had intercourse and babies with women, they wouldn't be men. They'd be a kind of hybrid stuff like they're splicing together in scientific factories today. All right, that's beside the point. Verse 5, notice it mentions men again, not angels. Verse 5, and God saw that the wickedness of who? Of man, the sons of God mentioned in verse 2, was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. See, men are the sons of God here. As proven in part 1, well, first off, notice this too. The sons of God did not come in unto the daughters of men until after the days of the giants in the earth. And as proven in part 1, the angels sinned before Adam. So how could the sin of the angels be taking more than one wife when, number 1, Jesus said angels don't marry, and number 2, women were not even in existence to marry at the time of the sin of the angels? Okay, now let's go back to when Satan rebelled. When Satan rebelled, 3 major things became a whole thing entirely. The earth became without form and void. Lucifer became Satan the devil. And angels under Satan became demons. And it all happened simultaneously. After the lead archangel Lucifer turned to rebellion, the 2 remaining archangels, Michael and Gabriel, both began covering God's throne, as seen on replicas of the Ark of the Covenant. Originally, it was only one archangel with the privilege of covering God's throne. That angel was Lucifer. Study the original language of Ezekiel 28:14. Cherub is used, cherub meaning singular. Now compare that to after Satan rebelled, the Ark of the Covenant plan at the time had Michael and Gabriel covering and their wings touching, reminding the other archangel there was one just as beautiful as them, because that was Satan's sin as he took pride in beauty, in his own beauty and outward. So cherubim is mentioned there in Exodus 25:18. Cherubim meaning plural, but originally Satan was the one covering the throne, and that's why in the Old Testament the Ark of the Covenant always went out before Israel in battle, because the Ark and the 2 angels immediately reminded Satan of his past. It was psychological warfare that not many Christians even know about that. Satan, pride, was and still is Satan's sin. Satan is literally the poster boy of sin. Notice Proverbs 16:5. Everyone proud in heart is an abomination unto the Lord. See, Satan became an abomination when pride entered his heart. Notice Obadiah verse 3. He said, the pride of thine heart hath deceived thee. Pride is a deceiver. Don't deceive yourself.